Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming, Skirk. If you're curious about what our favorite abyssal mermaid has been up to, well, this is the video for you. Let's take a look at some first impressions of Skirk, ranging from various levels of investment in today's early access video on everything Skirk. Okay, now I have to be completely honest, I was hoping she was going to introduce a new element like Quantum or Void or something, but she is in fact a cryo DPS character who is oxymoronically both very flexible and very restrictive at the same time. Let's dive somewhat deep into her capabilities, although definitely not as deep as Skirk threw Child back into the abyss, because I'll be releasing an even deeper dive with a full guide video when she's released, so be sure to smack that subscribe button so you don't miss it. This video was filmed on the early access server and is not indicative of the final product. There may be some changes on release, so be sure to check the comments down below to see if there are any. Now we've got three very important questions to try to answer. 1. Is she a strong DPS character? 2. Does she need a certain Escoffier? And most importantly, how does her outfit contain a literal parallax galaxy in it? Well, being the clothing expert that I am, hopefully I can answer at least 2 of those very important questions as we explore what Skirk can do for you if you fish her out of the gacha. But first things first, let's take a look at some of the aspects of her design. Starting with, if you actually see, we have the black sword equipped, and you can see it just kind of sticking out of her dual sabers like kind of a sore thumb. And speaking of which, yes, she has dual sabers, and if you are like a Darth Maul type dual saber enjoyer, you are going to like her basic attack string. Fortunately, with the power of money and her signature weapon, now her signature weapon looks like it matches perfectly with her dual sabers. Now, in terms of Skirk's exploration capabilities, she can actually hold her elemental skill to move at increased speeds, giving her some pretty decent ground speed and momentum. However, one really interesting detail that they actually added for her is that if you use it and its duration ends over the water, she will actually be able to stand on water for a couple of seconds before, I guess, failing to stand in the water for any longer, which at this point, you're going to have to swim the rest of the way. Now, a really cool aspect of her kit that I feel like a lot of people are going to overlook is some of the quality of life that her exploration actually provides. And one thing that's really neat is that if you use her hold elemental skill, she will actually generate her special energy, which I'm pretty sure it's called Abyss Juice, trademark pending. So yeah, you can just fill up her elemental burst as you move your way along to the next fight. So here we go, just like this. Now we have her elemental burst available for the beginning of the fight in order to take out the enemies. And okay, one of them survived, so we'll just take her out real quick. Now, in terms of Skirk's ground speed, it is somewhat comparable to Yelan's, although I do think it is noticeably a bit slower. But of course, Skirk can traverse over water, whereas Yelan cannot. And in fact, the two of them make a great duo because they are both good in the same team, as well as, you know, being able to alternate between their elemental skills in order to get from point A to point B. Skirk also changes her costume when she uses her elemental skill into a much darker and edgier color palette. Personally, I can't decide which one I like more, and from visuals and design alone, she's going to leave a void rift in my wallet. So let's finally take a look at her actual kit, and we're actually going to start off with the black sword. And I know the black sword isn't free-to-play friendly because, well, you literally have to purchase it in the battle pass. However, it is the closest weapon that we have to the actual free-to-play friendly options, like the Finale of the Deep and the Calamity of the Issue, which both of which should actually perform better than the black sword, so do keep that in mind. Now, Skirk in combat is a pretty interesting character, and she actually has multiple playstyles, but let's start with this first one, which is going to be her basic attack spam. By just pressing E, she infuses herself with basic attacks, and she is able to spam these cryo-infused basic attacks. As we can see, she did a moderate amount of damage to our Dorito friend. All right, so this time we're going to start off with a bit more Serpent Subtlety, and more importantly, we're actually going to activate a core passive of hers, which is giving her Death Crossing stacks. And you can see there that we attacked once with Barbara, we attacked once with Kokomi, we got 2, and now we attacked again with Charlotte to get all 3 Death Crossing stacks. And with these Death Crossing stacks, now she does way more damage. You can see 46,000 attacks here on her basic 5. And unfortunately, while editing, this is when I realized that this account was still at world level 8. Some of the clips in this video are at world level 8, but for the things that matter, I went back and redid all of it at world level 9. Anyway, at world level 9, we can see that her normal attack spam playstyle with 3 stacks of Death Crossing did around 742,316 damage, which in my opinion is still pretty solid for the Black Sword. Okay, now what's going on with Death Crossing stacks? If a Hydro or Cryo character on Skirk's team hits an enemy with Hydro or Cryo damage, not including Skirk, Skirk will get a Death Crossing stack. Each character can only provide 1 stack, and each Death Crossing stack improves her normal attack multipliers significantly, with 1 stack dealing 10% more damage, 2 stacks dealing 20% more damage, and 3 stacks dealing a whopping 70% more damage than at 0 stacks, making this a crucial passive to fulfill. Skirk also has this unique gimmick where she generously generates void rifts in your wallet via non-melt cryo reactions. She can absorb these via various methods, and more details on that will be in her full guide video, but basically absorbing them gives her Serpent Subtlety, aka her Abyss Juice, which can extend her elemental infusion state, and via her mini second burst or whatever, it provides a minor normal attack damage bonus. Anyway, back to the innocently ignorant world level 8 me, where if she has enough Serpent Subtlety, she can perform her other ultimate, or I guess her first ultimate, which actually just does a lot of damage. So let's go ahead and give her 3 Death Crossing stacks really quick. Go ahead, there we go, we have 2, and now we have 3. And with enough Void Energy, or I guess, sorry, Abyss Juice, now we can do this. And just like that, even with the Black Sword, she is already doing this much damage with her Elemental Burst. So yeah, if she has over half of her Serpent Subtlety, she can do her other ultimate, which just does a lot of damage, dealing additional damage based on how much Serpent Subtlety she has. More details on her scaling will come with the full guide video, but I can definitely tell you that her burst multipliers are comically high. Similar to her normal attacks, her burst damage also goes through similar damage gains through her Death Crossing stacks. So regardless of her playstyle, you want a full team of Hydro and Cryo characters. Alright, and let's briefly talk about her unique energy mechanic. Skirk's energy, aka Serpent Subtlety, isn't actually energy, and she doesn't fill it up via collecting particles. Instead, she fills it up by using her skill and grabbing various suspicious holes that are lying around. Since it's not technically elemental energy and it's instead some type of abyss juice, this means that she works with the finale of the Deep Gallery's artifact set, which requires her to be at 0 energy. So let's go ahead and kick this off with one of Skirk's better teams / best teams, and it is going to be Skirk with Escoffier as well as Furina. And Shenhe here in the 4th slot is definitely the most replaceable member of the team, so do keep that in mind and don't feel pressured into pulling for her. We will go through many alternatives for her. And yeah, so let's go ahead and give this team a quick try against our green pudgier friend, because now we are at world level 9, and we're redoing all this right now. But let's go ahead and go for it. So here we go. Gonna go through her cookie cutter basic attack string, and you can see that this team does indeed do some pretty good damage with quite a lot of extra time to spare on the rotation. Now many of you are probably going to be wondering, what about if you do not have Escoffier? And that is a great question, and let's see if Skirk can circumvent that issue with a healer like Charlotte instead. So it's going to go ahead and approach the boss with her hold elemental skill, and here we go. iframe through that. And hopefully we can keep the boss inside of the circle. Gonna be close. Oh, all right. I count that as single cycling the green pudgy friend here, but definitely a big noticeable drop in terms of the overall team damage output in a single rotation. I did a couple more tests between Charlotte and Escoffier, and the clear times ended up being relatively similar to each other. This is for a couple of reasons. First, Charlotte actually takes less field time than Escoffier, thus allowing Skirk to start attacking sooner. Second, the green pudge's 1.645 million hit points is frankly too puny of an HP pool these days. In longer rotations and against much chunkier bosses, the difference will be much more significant, but for squishy enemies like the green pudge nowadays, it hardly matters. As of Skirk's release, Furina and Escoffier are simply too powerful to have any real competition. However, the fourth slot is where things get a little weird. And just for fun, you can even use some pretty goofy alternative options, like in this case, a Cinder City Thrilling Tales Milani. Let's go ahead and give this team a quick little showcase. So we just have to hit the boss once like that in order to trigger the buffs. And you can see here that Skirk's damage is still really high right now. Yeah, what a weird world we live in version 5.7. Anyway, this fourth slot is surprisingly flexible. And just to reinforce that point from earlier, how you do not really need Shenhe. In fact, of the characters, unless your Shenhe is at Constellation 6, Shenhe, I would say, is the most replaceable member out of these characters. So let's go ahead and kind of demonstrate that with an alternative option like Yelan. I'm gonna go ahead and pretty much do the exact same rotation yet again. So here we go. And go into the highly skilled basic attack spam. And this is one really nice thing that I like about Skirk too, is that she is great for all sorts of different levels of skill. In this case, you know, you can just mash the basic attack button and get some pretty good mileage out of her. So yeah, we definitely still had some time left on that rotation. And one more quick showcase I want to give you guys with this specific team archetype is actually with Dahlia. And the reason for this is because sometimes you're actually going to want to run a shield. And of course, Dahlia does indeed provide that shield. So why do you want a shield? It is for the calamity of a shoe or weapon. Now, of course, in this specific showcase, we do not have the calamity of a shoe equip, but Skirk also benefits from the attack speed provided, which is really nice, increasing her DPS from essentially another multiplier of her attacking faster. Mona with Noblesse or Tenacity and Thrilling Tales provides some pretty solid buffs for very little investment. Citlali with the Starcaller's Watch provides Cinder City buffs and a shield for the Calamity of a Shoe. And yes, I do actually recommend the Starcaller's Watch for Citlali because it's actually quite hard for her to fulfill both the Cinder City and Thrilling Tales' conditions. So what if Skirk also threw your wallet into the void? Well, let's take a look at some of her more free-to-play friendly-ish options. And unfortunately, when it comes to 4-star only characters and combinations, this is where I believe she is a bit lacking. And honestly, Escoffier as well as Furina are just too strong of characters to substitute with 4-star characters. But hey, let's take a look at what a team like this can do. We have Xingqiu as well as Constellation 0 Dahlia and Charlotte. So let's go ahead, give this team a quick try. We're just going to go ahead and do all their shenanigans right here. And we are even going to go for Charlotte's hold elemental skill, because we are that desperate for buffs right now. But you see that the attack speed that Dahlia provides is pretty fun, actually. She attacks so fast with them. So we're gonna go ahead and just do the rotation again. And no surprise here that she wasn't able to single cycle Kongomoto, but actually, you know, very clean 2-cycle with plenty of time left on the second rotation. So I think this is pretty decent, given, you know, what we're working with with this team, and she can definitely carry some, you know, like less impactful characters on her team. So Skirk, of course, has two main playstyles, with one of them being more of a sub DPS or nuker. And let's go ahead and give that a quick try. And we are indeed using her signature weapon now, because unfortunately the black sword is absolutely atrocious for nuke damage, especially elemental burst nuke damage. So yeah, that's why we're going to go ahead and now try this out with her signature weapon. Let's go ahead and approach the boss like this. And the rotation is obviously going to be very similar, and we are using Thrilling Tales Mona instead to amplify the burst damage. And there we go. Let's go ahead. And bam! Just like that, she's able to effectively one-shot Kongomoto there with her nuke damage, which is honestly pretty impressive, all things considered. Because of her having multiple playstyles available, she can even be used on a double nuke team with Ayaka. While she admittingly power creeps Ayaka for this role, having much better quality of life against enemies that move, not needing energy recharge, having a better hitbox on their burst, having lower cooldown, looking cooler, and even dealing more damage. Fortunately, they can be used in cryo junction of each other if so desired. How very kind of Skirk to power creep Ayaka and freeze teams, but to still extend a welcoming hand to her in the process. In fact, this is so bad that Skirk even generates pity cryo particles for Ayaka, despite those cryo particles being literally useless for herself. Heck, we can even use a main DPS as the fourth slot, like Neuvillette. This is a great use of Skirk's nuking potential, as she can just perform her nuke and then Neuvillette can take it from there to provide another element to deal damage with and massive AoE. This unique team is interesting because it gives Neuvillette a front-loaded nuke option, which otherwise his teams typically lack. I tried a couple of melt teams, keyword tried. Unfortunately, none of them felt good. For normal attack spam, she literally can't generate any void rifts, making her nearly impotent, unable to last for any longer than a few seconds. And for her big one pump chump nuke, it did less damage in melt than in her usual team, which completely defeats the purpose. So I've got one more bonus playstyle for Skirk. Yes, she has another playstyle where basically if you start off with more than 0 abyss juice, or you know, a certain amount of abyss juice, then she will be able to actually open up the fight with an elemental burst nuke, as well as go into her normal attack spam. Let's go ahead and give that a try really quick. So we're just going to go into the typical rotation, and it's time to open up with her burst and straight into her normal attack spam, because we did not have to use an elemental skill to generate the void energy for her to use the burst in the first place. This means that we can actually use her elemental skill to go into her normal attack spamming state. So yes, a third potential option and playstyle of kind of a dual hybrid nuker basic attack spammer that Skirk has available to her. So yeah, whether it's her burst playstyle or her normal attack spam playstyle or even her hybrid playstyle, Skirk at a baseline just does a lot of damage. Her multipliers are honestly overtuned, and largely because she doesn't have any amplifying reactions like Melt to rely on. If I had to summarize Skirk in just a few words, she is the most flexible, restrictive character in the game. So how is she flexible? Well, having 2.5 playstyles means she can fit on multiple different variations of freeze-related teams. She can be a sub DPS nuker, she can be a phenomenal on-field main DPS with her normal attack spam playstyle, and she can even squeeze out a little bit of extra juice for a nuke plus normal attack spam playstyle. There are certain situations where you might choose one over the other as well. Her builds are also surprisingly flexible, with outside of her signature weapon, a lot of different weapon options, and she even has quite a few different artifact set options, with some flexibility in her goblet choice as well. Not only that, but she can easily carry weaker Hydro and Cryo characters like Mika, Candace, Chongyun, Dahlia, Charlotte, etc., because on top of the minor buffs and utility that each of them provide, they are still buffing her damage significantly through simply providing death crossing stacks for her. Skirk also is a very interesting character in that she's pretty easy to just pick up and play, while also having a lot of potential for min-maxing, like Void Rift generation, combo optimization, attack speed breakpoints, and so much more, which will give both casuals and sweatlords a satisfying gameplay experience. Now, the issue of her being restrictive is super obvious. It is highly recommended for her to be ran with Hydro and Cryo characters, and only Hydro and Cryo characters, and preferably at least one from each element. She also really appreciates persistent Hydro application from off-field to trigger freeze for generating Void Rifts, thus making her even more restrictive. Oh right, and I forgot to mention earlier, but if you swap off of her during her E infusion, she'll lose that infusion, adding another point to the restrictive points scoreboard. And another point in favor of her restrictiveness is that Furina and Escoffier are just two of the best characters in the game, and thus there is no close substitute for either of them in a Skirk team. Even if Skirk is very powerful at a baseline, which I personally think she is, since there are hardly any substitutes that come even close to this baguette enthusiast duo, you'll still feel like you're missing out on a lot without one or the other. And one last issue is that she's not nearly as good with 4 cryo characters on her team. So Imaginarium Theaters without Hydro are going to be pretty annoying for her. Perhaps there will always be a Hydro bonus cast member, which can help, but still, this is honestly a pretty annoying part of her design, especially given the nature of Imaginarium Theater, which is already restrictive in its own design. So yeah, if you like what you see, Skirk is a phenomenal character, especially with Escoffier and Furina, and I personally think she's pretty darn good at free-to-play levels as well, because she has a great damage floor and is able to carry less meta Hydro and Cryo characters, and is further enhanced by the meta Hydro and Cryo characters. I personally think Skirk provides pretty decent value for most people's accounts if you need a Cryo DPS character. Skirk is honestly strong enough to carry very poorly built, minimally invested, low-tier Cryo and Hydro teammates, which makes her a pretty solid budget choice regardless. Let me know what you think about Skirk down in the comments below, and also stay tuned for her full guide video, coming out on her release. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.